The espresso machine shrieked. It blasted a veil of hot steam, carrying the bitter scent of coffee straight into Scarlett's face. Her hands had grown rough and calloused after 3 years of doing the same thing, again and again. Her back ached, a dull, persistent pain that had become so familiar she barely noticed it anymore. 8 hours on her feet, bending down to grab supplies, hauling trays of dirty cups. All of it was worlds away from the life she once had, a life with servants at her beck and call, where her biggest worry was choosing which dress to wear to tonight's charity gala. Scarlett pushed those thoughts aside. She focused on the latte in front of her. The thermometer climbed steadily. 60 degrees, 65, 70. Perfect. She poured the milk and drew a heart that was passable on the foam. Not pretty enough for Instagram, but good enough for the lawyer out at the counter who was growing impatient. The doorbell chimed. Scarlett looked up on instinct, her smile already waiting on her lips. Then her heart stopped. Roman Blackwood stood in the doorway. He was just as she remembered, and somehow more than that, taller than the other customers, broader through the shoulders. He carried an authority that made the entire room, without meaning to, turn its attention toward him. His black hair was cut shorter than before, styled with the kind of careful precision only money could buy. The black suit he wore probably cost more than 6 months of her wages put together, tailored so perfectly it moved with him like a second skin. But it was his eyes that froze her in place. Those storm-gray eyes. She had seen them soften with desire. She had seen them go cold with fury. Now they were on her with an intensity that made her knees want to give out. Time collapsed. 3 years of carefully built distance. 3 years of running. 3 years of hiding. 3 years of assembling a new life. All of it shattered in the space between 2 breaths. Scarlett. Her name on his mouth was like a key turning in a lock she thought she had thrown away long ago. His voice was low, controlled, with a faint Italian note inherited from his mother. It made every word sound like a caress, or a threat, depending on his mood. Scarlett could not move, could not breathe. Her hand clamped around the edge of the counter so tightly her knuckles blanched white. Then, from behind her, she heard the sound she feared most. A clear, bright laugh drifted out from the back room, where her coworker Megan was watching the twins during Scarlett's shift. Ethan and Noah were playing with the toy cars Scarlett had brought from home. Her children, their children. Roman's gaze slid past her shoulder toward that sound, and something shifted in his expression. Not quite a smile, but close. Recognition. Confirmation. 3 years she had run. 3 years she had kept the children hidden from their father. 3 years she had believed she had escaped the monster. But the monster had found her, and he knew about the children. Could Scarlett protect them? Or would she, once again, fall back into the arms of the man she had once fled? Follow along with this deeply emotional story. If you enjoyed it, do not forget to hit like and share to support the channel. And if you have not subscribed yet, subscribe now so you do not miss the next stories. Scarlett did not have time to think. A mother's instinct seized control of her legs before reason could even react. She spun around and surged toward the door that led to the back room, her heart hammering in her chest as if it wanted to burst straight out. Her slip-resistant shoes screeched against the tile. She shoved the door hard, slipped inside, and immediately dropped to her knees, wrapping both arms tight around her 2 small sons. Ethan and Noah looked up, wide-eyed and puzzled as they stared at their mother. They still held their toy cars in their hands, not yet understanding what was happening. Scarlett drew in a deep breath, trying to rein in the trembling that was spreading through her body. She held them as though they were the only lifeline left to her in a stormy sea. Then the door behind her opened. Scarlett did not need to turn around to know who it was. The familiar scent of his cologne flooded the small room, carrying with it memories of nights she had once lain in his arms, of fevered kisses, and of the nightmares that had driven her to the edge. Roman stepped in and closed the door behind him with a movement that was gentle, yet final. That soft sound landed like the latch of a cage. Ethan, the son who was older than Noah by exactly 7 minutes, was the first to speak. He tipped his face up at the tall stranger, looming in the cramped room, his green eyes, the mirror of his mother's, bright with curiosity. "Who are you?" The clear sweetness of her son's voice tightened Scarlett's heart into a knot. She wanted to cover his mouth, to snatch them up and run as far as she could, but her feet felt nailed to the floor. Roman lowered himself slowly, kneeling until he was level with the child's gaze. The cold lines of his face softened a little. Only a little, but enough for Scarlett to recognize it. It was an expression she had never seen on him before. "I am an old friend of your mother's." Roman's voice was deep and lighter than usual, as if he were trying not to frighten the boy. Ethan tilted his head, thoughtfulness written plainly across his round, cherubic face. Then he broke into a bright smile, completely unaware of the storm coiling between the two adults. "I am Ethan Carter Blackwood." He announced it with pride, his chest puffing out as if he were presenting the greatest title in the world. "And this is my little brother, Noah Carter Blackwood. We are twins." Scarlett closed her eyes. It felt as if someone had driven a fist into her chest. In that instant, she wished she had given them different names, any other names. But 3 years ago, alone in a hospital bed, exhausted after a difficult delivery, she had not been able to stop herself from placing his surname as their middle name. It was the only thread she had allowed herself to keep, a small fragment of the man she had once loved, before she discovered the monster hiding inside. Roman shot to his feet, his jaw locked hard, a vein rising at his temple. Those storm-gray eyes swung to Scarlett, and for one fleeting moment, she saw something that made her heart falter. Pain, not anger, not rage, just the pure hurt of a father realizing he had missed the first years of his children's lives. But the moment lasted only a heartbeat. The cold mask slid back into place. "Scarlett, are you okay?" Megan appeared in the doorway, her eyes flicking back and forth between Scarlett and the unfamiliar man. The young woman clearly felt the air in the room, tight enough to choke. Scarlett swallowed hard, forcing a reassuring smile. "I'm fine, Megan. Can you go back to the counter and help out? This is someone I used to know. We need to talk." Megan hesitated, worry lingering on Scarlett's pale face. But in the end, she nodded and retreated, pulling the door shut behind her. The room sank into silence. Only the sound of toy cars rolling across the floor remained, innocent and bright, a stark contrast to the storm roaring between the two adults. "Carter," Roman finally spoke, his voice rough as though it had to push through some invisible barrier to get out. "You gave them my surname as their middle name." It was not a question. It was a statement, a confirmation of what he had just witnessed. Scarlett lifted her chin, her green eyes meeting his gray ones straight on. She would not let him see her fear. Not now. Not in front of the children. Don't misunderstand. Her voice was ice cold. "That is all you will ever get from us. A name, nothing more." Roman did not flinch at her declaration of war. He did not even frown. Instead, a smile as thin as a razor appeared on his lips, the kind of smile Scarlett knew well, an omen of terrible things about to come. "A name." He repeated it, his voice deep and unhurried, as if he were savoring every syllable. "You think that is all I am going to get, Scarlett?" He walked to the small table cluttered with coffee boxes and picked up one of the toy cars the children had been playing with. Ethan and Noah looked up at the unfamiliar man, but they did not seem afraid. They were too little to understand the danger closing in around this room. "I found you 3 months ago," Roman said, his eyes still on the toy car in his hand, as if it were the most interesting thing in the world. "It took 33 months to follow your trail from Chicago to Portland, and then from Portland to Seattle. You hid well, I will give you that. A new identity, cash only, no social media, no contact with anyone from your old life. You even changed your hair color." Scarlett felt the blood in her veins turn to ice. 7 months. He had known where she was for 7 months. Roman set the toy car down. His gray gaze finally lifted to meet hers. There was no anger in those eyes, no fury, only the cold calm of a predator who had waited patiently long enough for his prey. "I know you wake up at 5 every morning," he continued, his voice flat, as if he were reading from a report. "You get to the coffee shop at 5:45 to prepare for your shift. You work 8 hours, 5 days a week. The children stay in the back with Megan for the entire shift, and you slip in to see them whenever you have the chance." Scarlett took a step back, instinctively pulling the boys closer to her. "On Sundays, you take them to the park 3 blocks from your apartment. That small park with the blue playground." Roman tilted his head, his eyes never leaving her pale face. "You read to them before bed every night. Their favorite book is Good Night, Little One." "Stop," Scarlett whispered, her voice shaking, but Roman did not stop. He took another step, shrinking the distance between them. "The apartment you rent is on the 3rd floor, an old building on Pike Street. The front door lock has been broken for 2 months now, and the landlord still has not fixed it. Your bedroom window looks out on a dark alley, with no bars for protection." His voice dropped lower, carrying a dangerous note. "Do you realize anyone could climb up there at night, Scarlett? Do you realize how exposed you and the children have been for the last 3 years?" Scarlett wanted to scream, to shout that she was afraid because of him, that he was the greatest danger she had ever known. But the words lodged in her throat. "Why?" she finally managed, her voice rough. "If you have known for 7 months, why wait until now? Roman was silent for a long moment. Then he answered, his tone softer, almost gentle. Because I wanted to be sure you would not come back on your own. The answer left Scarlett numb. I waited. Roman continued. I gave you time and space. I hoped that maybe, just maybe, you would realize I am not the monster you imagined, and you would return. But you did not come back, Scarlett. You never came back. He stepped closer again, until only a few handspans separated them. Scarlett could smell his cologne. She could feel the warmth radiating from his body. She wanted to retreat, but the wall was behind her. For the last 3 years, I have changed everything. Roman's voice sank into a whisper. Everything that frightened you, everything that made you run. I cleared it all away, Scarlett. I did it for you, for the children. His hand rose. His fingertips brushed her cheek. Scarlett shuddered, but she could not pull away. You can change your name, change your hair, change your city. You can run to the ends of the earth. His gray eyes held her green ones, fierce and unyielding. But you will always be mine, Scarlett. You became mine the day you said the words I do. Nothing can change that truth. Not time, not distance, not fear. He stepped back 1 pace, giving her room to breathe. But his gaze still pinned her in place. You and the children will come home with me. It was not an offer. It was a declaration. And this time, I will not let you run again. Roman's declaration echoed through the small room, but Scarlett's mind had already drifted somewhere else. Back 3 years, to when it all began. To the moment her life took a turn she could never have imagined. 3 years ago, Scarlett was 24. She had just buried her father, the man who had fought lung cancer for 2 full years before finally letting go. He died on a winter night, when snow lay white over the city of Chicago, leaving her an Italian restaurant sinking under debt, and an older brother she could not depend on. Rosetta Restaurant, the only legacy of the Hayes family, had been opened by her grandfather 50 years earlier. It was where she had grown up among the scent of basil and tomato sauce, where she learned to knead pizza dough when she was only 5, where her father had spent his entire life trying to protect what they had built. But 2 years of staggering medical expenses had drained every saved dollar. The restaurant was losing money, the loans were piling up, and Scarlett had to drop out during her final year of college to come home and help her family. Then Derek appeared with news that made her world collapse completely. Her brother, Derek Hayes, 33 years old, had been addicted to gambling since college. Scarlett knew it. The whole family knew it. But she did not know that while their father lay in a hospital bed, Derek had been borrowing money in secret from people he never should have gone near. $400,000. A debt owed to the Blackwood family. The name Blackwood in Chicago was like the name of the devil. Everyone knew who they were. Everyone knew what they did. But no one dared to say it out loud. They owned half the city, from the skyscrapers to the darkest alleys. And Roman Blackwood, heir to that empire, was rumored to be even more ruthless than his father. You have to go with me. Derek dropped to his knees in front of her, his eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep and, probably, from drinking. Please, Scarlett. They gave me 1 week to pay it back. 1 week. I do not have $400,000. I do not even have $400. What does that have to do with me? Scarlett asked, her voice trembling. I heard Roman Blackwood likes meetings that are personal. If you go with me, if you beg for me, maybe he will give me more time. Derek grabbed his sister's hand, squeezing until it hurt. You are all I have left, Scarlett. Please. They will kill me. And she went. Scarlett remembered that afternoon as clearly as if it had just happened. She wore the simplest black dress she owned, her hair pinned neatly at the nape of her neck. No makeup. She did not want to attract attention. She only wanted to beg mercy for her brother and leave as fast as she could. Roman Blackwood's office sat on the top floor of a skyscraper in downtown Chicago. When the elevator doors opened, Scarlett felt as if she had stepped into another world. Marble floors, furniture made of black oak, paintings that looked like they belonged in a museum more than an office. Everything radiated power and wealth so heavy it was suffocating. Derek trembled at her side as they were led into the conference room. And there, seated behind a massive wooden desk, was Roman Blackwood. He was younger than she had imagined. 33, yet he looked as if he had lived through hundreds of years. Black hair, gray eyes as cold as steel, a square jaw and thin lips that rarely, if ever, formed a smile. He was studying a file when they walked in, not bothering to look up. Derek Hayes. His voice was low and cold. The man who owes me $400,000 and thinks bringing his sister will soften me. Derek opened his mouth, but no words came. He had frozen in fear. Scarlett stepped forward. She did not know where the courage came from. Maybe from desperation. Maybe from love for her useless brother. Please give my brother more time. Her voice carried, shaking, but clear. We will find a way to pay you back, I promise. Roman Blackwood finally looked up, and in the instant those gray eyes met her green ones, Scarlett saw something change. The chill in his gaze dissolved, replaced by something fiercer, darker, hungrier. He looked at her the way a wolf looks at prey, and she knew, in that very moment, that her life would never be the same again. Roman said nothing for so long that Scarlett thought the entire room had stopped breathing. He only watched her, gray eyes sweeping from the top of her head to her feet and back again, as if he were appraising something precious. Then he stood. Get out, Roman told Derek, his voice allowing no argument. I want to speak to your sister alone. Derek looked at Scarlett, his eyes full of pleading and, beneath it, cowardice. Then he lowered his head and walked out of the room, leaving his sister alone with the wolf. When the door closed, Roman moved to the window and looked out at the city of Chicago spread beneath him. His back was to her, yet Scarlett could feel the weight of his presence pressing down on the air. $400,000. He spoke, his tone deep and unhurried. That is what your brother owes me. With interest, it will become $500,000 within 1 month. He cannot pay it, and you know it. Scarlett swallowed hard. I will find a way. My father's restaurant. Rosetta Restaurant? Roman turned, a brief mocking smile crossing his mouth. I checked. It is losing money. It owes the bank $200,000, and it will be seized within 6 months if no one rescues it. It felt as if someone had punched her in the stomach. He knew everything, all of it. Roman stepped toward her, one measured step at a time, until he was only an arm's length away. I have an offer for you, Scarlett Hayes. She did not answer. She only stared at him, wary. I will erase all of Derek's debt. He said it the way someone might propose an ordinary business deal. I will pay off the bank loan for Rosetta Restaurant, fund an expansion, turn it into one of the most famous Italian restaurants in Chicago. Your father's legacy will be protected. Scarlett waited. She knew there would be a condition. There was always a condition. In exchange, Roman continued, gray eyes locked on hers, you will be my wife. The world tilted beneath Scarlett's feet. She was certain she had misheard him. Your wife, she repeated, as if she were speaking a foreign language. My wife, Roman confirmed, without a tremor of doubt. A legal marriage. You will take the Blackwood name, live in my home, appear at my side as my wife in public. Why? Scarlett whispered. You could have anyone. Why me? Roman did not answer right away. He lifted his hand, his fingers brushing a loose strand of her hair, winding it around his finger as if he were admiring something rare. Because I want you, he said simply, as if that explained everything. You have 48 hours to think. 48 hours. For 48 hours, Scarlett did not sleep, did not eat. She only paced her small apartment and cried. She thought of her father, of Rosetta Restaurant, of the years he had sacrificed to build it. She thought of Derek, a useless brother, yet still the only blood family she had left in the world. She thought of her own future, the dreams of a college degree, of a career, of true love. And then she thought of those gray eyes, the way they looked at her as if she were the only thing of value in the room. 48 hours later, Scarlett stood before Roman Blackwood and said the 2 words that would change her life forever. I do. What she did not expect was what came after. Roman did not rush her. He gave her 2 months before the wedding, and in those 2 months he courted her in a way no one had ever courted her. Fresh flowers delivered to her door every morning, not cliché roses, but lavender, the kind she had once mentioned, almost by accident, that she loved. Dinners at the finest restaurants in the city, where he pulled out her chair, poured her wine, listened to her speak as if every word she said was the most fascinating thing in the world. He never forced her into anything. He never crossed the boundaries she set. He never demanded what she was not ready to give. The wedding took place on a spring day, in an old church with hundreds of guests. Scarlett wore white, held a bouquet of lavender, and as she walked down the aisle toward Roman, she saw something in his eyes that made her heart stumble. Not cold calculation, but admiration, desire, something that was almost love. And for the first time since her father died, Scarlett felt that maybe, just maybe, everything would be all right. 6 months after the wedding, Scarlett realized she had made a terrible mistake. She had fallen in love with her husband. That was never part of the plan. When she said the words, I do, at the altar, she had told herself this was only an arrangement, an exchange. She would keep her distance. She would protect her heart. She would never allow herself to become weak in front of this man. But Roman Blackwood dismantled every wall she built, with a patience and gentleness she never expected. He brought her breakfast in bed every morning, not by ordering the staff to do it, but with his own hands. Coffee made exactly the way she liked it. Toast with butter and strawberry jam, a small sprig of lavender set on the tray. He sat beside her while she ate, his fingers lazily tracing circles on her back, telling her about the meetings he had that day, as if her opinion truly mattered. When she was exhausted after a long day at Rosetta Restaurant, which had now become one of the most sought-after dining destinations in Chicago, Roman would draw her down onto the sofa, lift her feet onto his lap, and massage each calf, each thigh until she melted into the cushions. He never asked for anything in return. He only watched her with those gray eyes, as if she were his entire universe, as if simply being near her was the greatest reward. And the nights that made Scarlett blush whenever she thought of them in daylight. Roman was a passionate lover, but never rough. Intense, yet always placing her comfort first. He learned her body the way one learns a piece of music, knowing exactly where to touch to make her breath hitch, where to make her moan, where to make her whisper his name in the dark. Scarlett did not know the exact moment she began to love him. Maybe it was the time he stayed up all night beside her bed when she had the flu, replacing the cool cloth on her forehead every hour. Maybe it was the time he flew back from New York 2 days early just because she mentioned over the phone that she missed him. Maybe it was the way he looked at her every morning when she woke up. Hair a mess, eyes still heavy with sleep, as if she were the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. Then the pregnancy test showed 2 red lines. Scarlett sat on the bathroom floor, staring at the impossible result. She was pregnant. She was carrying Roman's child, the living proof of 6 months of love she never expected. Tears streamed down her cheeks, but they were tears of happiness, a pure, fierce happiness, so intense she thought her chest might burst. She wanted to tell Roman in the most special way, maybe a romantic dinner at home, with candles and wine, where she would give him a pair of tiny baby shoes and watch his face when he understood. Maybe she would take him to Rosetta Restaurant, where they had first met, and write the announcement on the menu. While she was planning, Scarlett happened to find a slip of paper that fell from the pocket of Roman's jacket when she took it to be washed. An address, written in his familiar handwriting. She did not recognize the place, but her mind immediately leapt to the best possibility. Roman had mentioned that he wanted to open another new restaurant, a place she could design and run entirely herself. Maybe this was the location he was preparing, a surprise for her. And if he could surprise her, then she could surprise him too. Scarlett decided she would go to that address tonight. While Roman was busy with work, as he always said, she would see the place first. She would imagine their future. And then she would tell him she was pregnant right there, turning it into the most unforgettable moment of their marriage. She did not know that decision would destroy everything. The address led Scarlett to an industrial district on the outskirts of Chicago, where old warehouses sat motionless in the dark. She parked some distance away, and the excitement in her chest slowly gave way to unease. This did not look like a place to open a restaurant. There were no streetlights, no signs, only gray concrete walls and a heavy, oppressive silence. But Scarlett was already here, and she recognized Roman's car parked directly in front of the largest warehouse, a thin spill of light leaking through a crack in the door. She stepped out of her car, one hand unconsciously resting on her flat stomach, where a tiny life was growing day by day. She would go inside. She would surprise her husband. She would tell him about the baby they were going to have. Everything would be perfect. The main door of the warehouse had a number keypad. Scarlett remembered the sequence she had once seen Roman enter when he opened the safe at home. 1997, his birth year. She tried it, and the door opened with a soft click. Inside, it was dark and cold. The smell of dampness mixed with something else, a sharp metallic tang that Scarlett did not recognize at first. She walked across the concrete floor, her heels echoing through the empty space. Then she heard it. A groan, the sound of flesh striking flesh, a man screaming in pain, cut off by another blow. Scarlett froze. Her heart slammed against her ribs, instinct screaming at her to turn around, to run, to not look. But her feet did not obey. As if hypnotized, she moved toward the light spilling from a small room in the corner of the warehouse, where the door stood slightly open. She pushed the door, and her world collapsed. Roman stood in the center of the room, his white shirt sleeves rolled to his elbows, bright red blood spattered across the fabric. In front of him was a man bound tightly to a chair, his face swollen until it no longer resembled anything it had once been. Blood ran from his nose, his mouth, from torn skin, dripping onto the floor in pooling dark stains. And Roman, her husband, the man who brought her breakfast in bed every morning, The man who held her every night and whispered words of love was staring at his victim with eyes as cold as ice. There was no anger, no hatred, only emptiness, detachment, as if beating another human being to the edge of death were simply routine work. The man in the chair moaned, begged in a voice warped by pain. Roman said nothing. He only tightened his blood-slick fist and struck him again. Scarlett vomited. The sound made Roman turn. In a single instant, his gray eyes met her green ones, and Scarlett saw the change cross his face, from blank coldness to shock, and then to something like panic. But she did not stay long enough to see more. Scarlett ran. She ran like she had never run in her life, stumbling, catching herself, running again. She burst out of the warehouse, threw herself into her car, and hit the gas, her hands shaking so badly she nearly lost control. The image of Roman standing in that pool of blood, those icy eyes, replayed in her mind like a horror film with no stop button. She made it home and ran straight to the bathroom, vomiting until her stomach was empty. Then she crouched in a corner, arms wrapped around her knees, shaking and crying until there were no tears left. All that night, Scarlett did not sleep. She lay in bed with her eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling, one hand on her belly, the child inside her child and Roman's, the child of a murderer. When dawn finally broke, she heard the door open. Familiar footsteps, the sound of Roman entering the bedroom. He had changed his clothes, clean, impeccable, as if last night had never happened. He bent down and kissed her cheek, warm breath and that familiar cologne. "Did you sleep well, Bissima?" he asked, his voice gentle as always. Scarlett closed her eyes, feeling his kiss like a burn on her skin, and she knew, in that very moment, that she could not raise a child in this world. She could not let her baby grow up beside a monster. She had to run. Scarlett waited for 3 days. 3 days of playing the perfect wife, cooking for Roman, smiling at him, lying in his arms each night while her body stayed rigid with fear. 3 days of planning, withdrawing cash in small amounts so it would not raise suspicion, hiding it in an old suitcase in the corner of her closet. On the 4th night, Roman said he had business to attend to. He kissed her forehead, told her he would be home late, told her not to wait up. Scarlett smiled and said she would go to bed early, and when the sound of his car faded at the end of the street, she moved. She took only a small handbag, a few changes of clothes, cash, identification, and the pregnancy test she had kept like a reminder of why she had to leave. She took nothing that belonged to Roman. No jewelry, no expensive clothes, nothing that could be tracked. She walked out of the luxurious penthouse without looking back. Portland was her first stop. Scarlett chose it because it was far enough from Chicago, but big enough to disappear into the crowd. She rented a small basement apartment, paid in cash, asked no questions. She found work as a waitress at a modest restaurant, working night shifts to avoid daylight. Her belly grew larger by the day, and she learned to hide it beneath loose, shapeless shirts. 6 months passed in constant dread. Anytime someone looked at her for too long, her heart skittered. Anytime a black car parked near her building, she lay awake all night. But little by little, she began to believe she had escaped, that Roman had given up, until the day she went to the grocery store and saw that man. He stood by the produce section, pretending to choose tomatoes, but his eyes were fixed on her. Scarlett recognized him at once. He was one of Roman's guards, the one who used to stand outside the office door whenever she came to see her husband. She abandoned her cart and ran. Seattle became her home. She arrived there on an overnight bus, her belly so large she could barely breathe. Not $1 left after paying for the ticket. She slept at the bus station the first night, curled on a hard plastic seat, one hand around her belly, praying for the child not yet born. 3 weeks later, Scarlett gave birth in a public hospital. Alone, no one held her hand as pain tore her body apart. No one wiped the sweat from her brow. No one cried with joy when the first cries of her babies filled the room. Twins, 2 baby boys. Scarlett looked at the tiny lives in her arms, eyes squeezed shut, little fingers curled tight, and she cried. She cried from exhaustion, from fear, from loneliness, but she also cried from love, a love so fierce and primal it stole her breath. She named them Ethan and Noah, and in the quiet of her own heart, she promised she would protect them at any cost. The months that followed were hell. Scarlett did any work she could find, waiting tables, cleaning houses, washing dishes in restaurants, babysitting for other people. She slept 4 hours a night, waking to her children's cries, nursing them on milk that grew thinner and scarcer because she did not have enough to eat. There were days she ate only 1 meal so she could save money to buy formula when her own milk was not enough. But she survived. And her children survived too. 3 years passed. Scarlett found steady work at the Grind, a coffee shop where the owner allowed her to bring the boys and keep them in the back room. She managed to rent a small apartment, cheap and worn, but hers. She changed her hair color, changed the way she dressed, changed even the way she spoke. She became Scarlett Mitchell, an ordinary single mother with an ordinary life. She thought she was safe, until today. Until the coffee shop door opened and Roman Blackwood walked in. The memories dissolved. Scarlett blinked and realized she was still standing in the small room stacked with coffee boxes. Her 2 sons staring at her, and the unfamiliar man with wide, puzzled eyes. And Roman was still there, his gray gaze never leaving her. The past had caught up to her, and this time, she did not know if she could run again. Roman studied her for a long time, his gray eyes unreadable. Ethan and Noah were still playing at her feet, completely unaware of the storm twisting between the 2 adults. At last, he spoke, his voice deep and slow, as if weighing every word. "I did not come here to force you back with me like a prisoner, Scarlett," he said. "I came to offer a deal." Scarlett let out a sharp, bitter laugh. "A deal? Like the last one? When you bought me with Derek's debt?" Roman did not argue. He took the blow as if he deserved it. "This time is different," he said. "This time, you get to negotiate. Everyone." He moved a little closer, but kept enough distance that she would not feel threatened. His gaze slid away from her and dropped to the 2 children babbling to each other, and his gray eyes softened in a way that felt strangely out of place. "These are my children." His voice went rough. "I lost the first 3 years of their lives. 3 years of not seeing them born, not hearing their first cries, not witnessing their first steps. I do not want to lose one more day. One." Scarlett wanted to scream that it was his fault, that he was the one who had pushed her to the edge. But she held it back, because somewhere deep inside, she knew that no matter who he was, the children still deserved to know their father. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice tired. 18 years, Roman said. "You stay with me until the boys are grown. Give me the chance to be a father, a husband. Give me the chance to prove that I have changed." "Don't." Scarlett opened her mouth to refuse, but he lifted a hand to stop her. "Let me finish," he continued. "If after 18 years you still want to leave, I will sign the divorce papers without asking for anything. You will be completely free. But you have to give me a chance, Scarlett. You owe me at least that." "I owe you?" she ground out. "I do not owe you anything. You took my children from me for 3 years. Roman's voice dropped, carrying a pain she had never heard in him before. "I woke up every morning in an empty house, wondering where you were, whether you were safe, whether the baby inside you was healthy. I did not know if they were boys or girls. I did not know who they would look like. I did not know if they would laugh or cry when they came into the world." Scarlett felt as if someone were squeezing her heart shut. She did not want to feel sympathy for him. She could not. "I have conditions," she said, her voice shaking but firm. Roman nodded. "Say them," aiding the day on. "No violence." She met his eyes head on. "Never. The children cannot witness anything from your world. They will grow up like normal children, not the children of a Mafia boss." "Agreed. I want my own money, an account I control completely, where I do not have to ask your permission to spend." "Agreed. And a separate bedroom." Scarlett drew a deep breath. "This is not a real marriage, Roman. This is only a co-parenting arrangement. I will not share a bed with you." And for more. This time, Roman was silent longer. She saw his jaw tighten, saw pain flicker through those gray eyes. But in the end, he nodded. "Agreed." Scarlett did not expect him to accept so easily. She had braced herself for a fight, for threats and coercion. But Roman stood there, taking every condition as if he were willing to trade anything just to be near his children. "But Scarlett," he stepped closer, his voice dropping into a whisper. "I will not give up on us. You can demand a separate bedroom. You can keep your distance. You can hate me if you want. But I will spend the next 18 years proving to you that I have changed, that the man you saw in that warehouse that night is not all that I am." He lifted his hand, his fingertips brushing her cheek, so gentle she almost thought she imagined it. "I will make you love me again, Scarlett. And this time, I will deserve that love." Action. 3 days later, Scarlett stood in the middle of a penthouse apartment that was 10 times larger than the old, worn building she had once rented in Seattle. Beyond the floor-to-ceiling glass, Elliott Bay stretched out like an enormous mirror, reflecting the sunset, with the majestic Olympic mountains rising in the distance like a backdrop. Inside, everything breathed luxury and refinement so rich it felt suffocating. cream-colored leather sofas, a dining table that could seat 12, a kitchen filled with appliances she did not even know how to use. Ethan and Noah were racing around the living room, their bright laughter echoing through the vast space. To them, this was an adventure. A new home with countless rooms to explore, new toys appearing as if by magic, and a man they had begun to call Mom's friend, who always looked at them with a tender kind of affection. They did not understand that their mother was slowly choking. "Mrs. Blackwood." A woman's voice came from behind her. Scarlett turned and saw a woman in her 50s, silver hair swept into a neat bun, a face stern but not without gentleness. "I am Catherine Chen, Mr. Blackwood's personal assistant. He asked me to help you adjust to your new life." Scarlett wanted to correct her, to say she was no longer Mrs. Blackwood, that she had never truly been Mrs. Blackwood. But she only nodded, too exhausted to argue. Catherine began to outline the schedule. The children would start at Ashwood Academy on Monday, one of the most expensive and prestigious preschools in Seattle, with a waiting list as long as 2 years. A bank account had been opened in Scarlett's name, with a balance of $10 million. She would meet a private physician tomorrow for a full health evaluation. And at 6 that evening, Mr. Blackwood wanted her and the children to have dinner with him at his penthouse in the downtown core. Each item on the schedule felt like an invisible chain tightening around her ankles, pulling her deeper into the world she had tried so hard to escape. When Catherine guided her to the bedroom, Scarlett stopped in the doorway. It was a secondary bedroom, not the master. Roman had kept his promise. The room was spacious, with a double bed, crisp white linens, and a small balcony overlooking the city. Next door was the boys' bedroom, decorated with race car bunk beds and hundreds of toys. But what caught in Scarlett's throat was the closet. She opened the closet door and went still. Inside were dozens of outfits, all in her size, and all in the colors she loved. Pale green, silver gray, ivory. There was no glaring red or bright pink, the shades she hated. No revealing outfits, nothing too flashy. Everything was elegant, refined, and perfect down to the smallest detail. Roman remembered everything. After 3 years, he still remembered. In the bathroom, her familiar skincare products were lined up neatly on the shelf, the same brand she had used when she was his wife. Before everything fell apart, she stared at the bottles and felt as if someone were crushing her heart. He had recreated her old life, or at least his version of it. A new gilded cage, more beautiful, more spacious, but still a cage. In the first days, Roman kept his promise about physical distance. He did not live in the same apartment with her and the children, but stayed in his own penthouse a few buildings away. But his presence was everywhere, in the fresh lavender that was replaced every day on the dining table, in the new storybooks that appeared on the children's shelf, in the brief texts each morning asking whether she had slept well, whether the boys were healthy. He did not invade her space, but he also did not let her forget he was there. Always there, waiting, patient, and that, in some ways, was even more frightening than force. Ethan and Noah adapted to their new life so quickly, it left Scarlett both relieved and aching. In only 1 week, they had memorized every corner of the penthouse. They knew exactly which cabinet held the cookies. They knew how to turn on the television to watch their favorite cartoons. And each morning they waited with eager impatience to go to their new school, with its enormous playground and their new friends. Ashwood Academy was exactly what Roman had promised. A paradise for little children, with devoted teachers, imaginative lessons, and world-class facilities. Every afternoon the boys came home with bright eyes, talking without pause about what they had learned, what they had played, what they had discovered. But what kept Scarlett awake at night was not the school or the luxury apartment. It was the way the boys were beginning to look at Roman. He came every evening, not to see her, but to spend time with his children. He sat on the floor of the boys' bedroom for hours, patiently teaching Ethan how to move the pieces on a chessboard. The boy was only 2.5, far too young to understand the complicated rules. But Roman never lost heart. He turned each piece into a character with its own story, making Ethan giggle every time the knight jumped across the squares. With Noah, Roman read stories. The younger child was shyer than his brother, usually clinging to Scarlett whenever a stranger appeared. But with Roman, Noah seemed to melt. He climbed into Roman's lap, curled into those broad arms, and listened to his father's deep voice as he told of Pooh Bear's adventures, or Peter Rabbit's. Sometimes Scarlett saw Noah fall asleep in Roman's arms, tiny fingers gripping the lapel of his shirt as if afraid Roman might disappear. Scarlett stood just outside the bedroom door, watching, always watching. She saw the way Roman gently laid Noah in bed without waking him, She saw the way he pulled the blanket up to the boy's chin, then bent to kiss each child on the forehead. She saw the way those gray eyes softened completely, every trace of coldness and fear vanishing, leaving only the pure tenderness of a father. Then came the day Ethan called him Daddy. It was a Sunday afternoon. Roman was teaching Ethan how to build a castle out of Lego, father and son sitting amid a scatter of colorful pieces across the carpet. Ethan tried to attach a block and could not, his little face tightening in frustration. "Daddy, help me." The whole room seemed to freeze. Scarlett stood in the kitchen doorway, a glass of water in her hand, her heart stopping in her chest. She saw Roman go utterly still, eyes widening, as if he could not believe what he had just heard. Ethan did not understand the weight of that moment. He was only upset because the Lego would not fit where he wanted it. But Roman looked as if someone had handed him the entire world. He bent down, helping his son with hands that trembled slightly, his voice rough when he answered, "All right, son, let Daddy help." After that, Daddy became what both boys called Roman. Noah began to reach for Roman the moment he appeared, small arms lifted high, asking to be held. Ethan ran to the door every evening, skipping and shouting, "Daddy's home," as if it were the most wonderful moment of the day. And Scarlett stood there watching it all, guilt grinding her down little by little. She had taken 3 years from them, 3 years in which Roman did not get to watch his children grow, did not get to hear their first babbling sounds, did not get to witness their unsteady first steps. 3 years in which the boys grew up without knowing they had a father, without anyone reading stories in a warm, deep voice, without anyone teaching them chess or building Lego castles. Every time the boys showed Roman affection, he would glance at Scarlett, not with triumph, not with blame, with hope, as if he were asking, "Do you see? I can be a good father. Give me a chance." And Scarlett did not know what she was supposed to feel. Anger because he was claiming their love, relief because the boys finally had a father, or fear because she was slowly losing the one reason she had left to hate this man. 3 weeks passed, and the walls Scarlett had built began to show cracks. Roman kept his promise with absolute precision. He never stepped into her apartment without being invited. He never touched her unless she allowed it. He never demanded anything beyond what they had agreed. He came every evening to play with the children, then left once they were asleep, without lingering, without finding excuses to stay a moment longer. His patience and his self-control unsettled Scarlett more than any force ever could. Then one afternoon, while the boys were down for their nap and Scarlett sat alone in the living room, Roman appeared carrying a thick leather briefcase. "I want to show you something," he said, setting it on the coffee table and opening it. Inside were dozens of folders, documents, and financial reports. Scarlett watched him warily. "What is this?" "Proof." Roman sat in the chair across from her, keeping a safe distance the way he always did. "You ran because you were afraid of my world. You were afraid of violence, of illegality, of what I was capable of. I want you to see that world does not exist anymore." She did not want to look. She did not want to believe. And yet her hands still reached for the first folder. What she read left her stunned. In the 18 months after she left, Roman had restructured the entire Blackwood empire. The illegal deals, the underground operations, the shadow agreements she had only ever heard rumors of, all of it had been sold off, shut down, or transferred to someone else. Now the Blackwood Corporation owned only high-end real estate, a chain of luxury restaurants, and investment funds audited with clear documentation. Every page carried the stamp of an independent accounting firm. Every transaction was recorded with a transparency that went down to the last cent. "Why?" Scarlett looked up, her voice barely a whisper. "Why did you do all of this?" Roman looked at her, and his gray eyes were no longer as cold as she remembered. "Because when you left, I realized I could own the whole world, and it would mean nothing if I lost you. I want to become a man worthy of you, Scarlett. And that means giving up everything that ever made you afraid." She wanted to say it was too late, that the past could not be erased, that she had seen the monster inside him, and she could not forget. But the words caught in her throat when he handed her one final folder. "And this," he said. "I bought it 2 months ago." Scarlett opened it and found the file of a nonprofit organization, Bright Futures Foundation, dedicated to education for poor children and children in difficult circumstances. The organization was running 12 free learning centers across Seattle, providing books, school supplies, and scholarships for thousands of children every year. "It is yours," Roman said. "I remember you said, early in our marriage, that you wanted to do something meaningful, that you wanted to help children who did not have the opportunities you once had. I cannot give you back the years you lost, but I can give you this, a purpose. A reason to wake up each morning beyond taking care of the boys. Scarlett stared at the folder, tears rising without her permission. She remembered that conversation, a winter night, when they lay wrapped in blankets after making love, and she had told him about her childhood dream, about wanting to become a teacher, about wanting to help children who struggled the way she once struggled before her father's restaurant became successful. She had assumed he was not listening. She had assumed it was only a whisper in the dark, something he would forget by morning. But he remembered. After 3 years apart, he still remembered. You do not have to decide right now. Roman stood, picking up the empty briefcase. Think about it. And if you want to verify anything in these documents, you have every right to hire a private investigator. I'm not hiding anything from you anymore, Scarlett. Never again. He left, and she was alone with the pile of folders and the chaos in her mind. Scarlett sat there for a long time, staring out the window where the sunset was turning the sky red, and for the first time in 3 years, she began to wonder, had she judged him wrong? Was the man she saw in that warehouse that night not all that he was? Was it possible, just possible, that he truly had changed? That night, Scarlett could not sleep. She lay in bed, eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling while images spun through her mind like a film with no stop button. Roman standing in a pool of blood in that warehouse. Roman patiently teaching Ethan to play chess. Those gray eyes looking at her with pain when she demanded a separate bedroom. The folders of documents proving he had changed everything. 2 versions of the same man, and she did not know which one was real. In the end, when the clock showed 2 in the morning, she gave up trying to sleep. She got out of bed, slipped on a thin cardigan, and walked into the living room, intending to make herself a cup of hot tea. She did not expect Roman to be there. He stood by the large window, his back to her, his outline silhouetted against the Seattle night glittering with lights. In his hand was a glass of whiskey, but she could see the amber liquid was untouched. He was not drinking. He was only standing there, looking out at the city, as if searching for answers to questions no one dared to ask. Scarlett started to turn back toward her room, but her feet did not obey. She stayed, and perhaps he sensed her presence, because he spoke without turning around. You cannot sleep either. She hesitated, then stepped closer, stopping a few feet away. The memories keep coming back. Roman nodded, still facing the window. I understand. I have been the same way. Every night. For 3 years. They stood in silence for a long time. For the first time since they had found each other again, the air between them was not tense or combative. There was only the shared exhaustion of 2 people, worn raw by running and chasing. I was wrong, Roman finally said, his voice deep and rough. When I married you, I should have told you everything. About my world, about what I did, about who I really was. Instead, I kept you in the dark and hoped you would never find out. Scarlett said nothing. She only listened. I thought I was protecting you, he continued. I thought if you did not know, you would be safe, you would be happy. But I was wrong. I did not protect you. I only deceived you. And when you found the truth in the worst possible way, I lost you. Why did you change? Scarlett asked, her voice as light as breath. Truly why? Not what you said before, but the real reason. Roman turned to look at her for the first time. In the darkness, his gray eyes were like deep lakes, holding emotions she had never seen in him before. Because when you left, I realized everything I built meant nothing, he said. Power, money, an empire. None of it mattered if I did not have you. And when I found out you were pregnant, that I was going to have children, I knew I had to change. Not to win you back, but to become a man worthy of you and the boys, whether you returned or not. Scarlett felt her heart tighten. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe so badly it hurt. The man that night, she said, her voice trembling slightly. The man you beat in the warehouse. Did you kill him? Roman held her gaze. No. Then why? Why did you beat him like that? His name is Marcus Delgado. Roman set the whiskey glass down on the window ledge. He was one of my men, someone I trusted. But he sold information to the Moretti family, my rivals. That information nearly got 12 of my men killed. He paused, drawing a slow breath. In my world, betrayal is paid for in blood. I taught him a lesson, but I did not kill him, Scarlett. I have never killed anyone. End of game. She wanted to ask more, to know more, and yet she was afraid of what she might hear. In the end, she asked only one question. Where is he now? Roman smiled, the first smile she had seen from him since they met again. He works for my security company, legal. He learned his lesson, and I gave him a second chance. He looked at her, his meaning clear. Just like I am asking you to give me a second chance. That late-night conversation changed something in Scarlett. Not that she had fully forgiven Roman, and not that she trusted him completely. But the ice she had built around her heart had begun to melt, little by little. She began to accept the role of running Bright Futures Foundation, spending each day at the charity's downtown Seattle office, where she could do something meaningful instead of sitting inside a luxury penthouse and thinking herself into knots. The work gave her purpose. It gave her a reason to rise each morning beyond caring for the boys. And more importantly, it gave her space to think about the future without being smothered by Roman's presence. Then that phone call came. Scarlett was sitting in her office, reviewing the file for a new learning center the foundation planned to open, when her cell phone vibrated. An unfamiliar number, no caller name. She hesitated for a second, then answered. Scarlett Blackwood. A man's voice came through, low and cold, carrying a smile she could feel even without seeing it. Or should I call you Scarlett Mitchell? The name you used in Portland? The blood in her veins turned to ice. Who is this? She asked, her voice shaking even as she tried to control it. Who I am does not matter, the voice continued. What matters is what I know. You were in Portland for 6 months before you came to Seattle, weren't you? 6 months your husband never knew about. In his way, the room tilted around her. She had never told Roman about Portland. She had told him she went straight to Seattle after leaving Chicago, cutting out the darkest 6 months of her life as if they had never happened. I have photos, Scarlett. The voice went on, slow and cruel. Photos of you and your landlord in Portland. Very interesting photos of the compromises a desperate pregnant woman has to make to keep a roof over her head. Tears rose to her eyes. Portland. 6 months of hell she had tried to bury in her memory. When the money ran out. When no one would hire a pregnant woman. When she had faced a choice between sleeping on the street or accepting the proposition of an older landlord. She did not sleep with him. She never went that far. But there were moments. There were humiliating situations she had endured in exchange for a safe place to stay for the child growing inside her. What do you want? She whispered. $60,000. Cash. You have 3 days. The voice replied. If you do not, these photos will be sent to Roman Blackwood and to every newspaper in Seattle. I am sure he will be very interested to learn what his wife was doing while she was pregnant with his child. Or whether it is really his child at all. The line went dead. Scarlett sat there, the phone still pressed to her ear, her body trembling beyond her control. $60,000. She could take that money from the account Roman had set up for her without having to explain. But what if he found out? What if he asked where it went? And worse, what if the blackmailer did not keep his word? What if he still sent the photos to Roman even after she paid? But what terrified her most was not the money or the scandal. It was the thought that Roman might begin to doubt Ethan and Noah were his. She knew the boys were his. She had never slept with anyone else. But those photos, if misunderstood, could plant suspicion. And that suspicion could destroy everything they were trying to build. She could not tell Roman. Not yet. Not when she did not know how to explain Portland, the dark months she had kept hidden. With trembling hands, Scarlett picked up the phone and called the only person she trusted. Megan answered on the second ring. Scarlett, is something wrong? I need to see you, Scarlett said, her voice breaking. Right now. Something happened, Megan. And I do not know what to do. Scarlett met Megan at a small coffee shop near Pike Place Market, the place where they used to sit and talk in the days when Scarlett was still working as a barista. Megan had arrived first. Worry was written plainly on her face when she saw Scarlett walk in with reddened eyes and a pale, drawn complexion. They chose a table in the corner, away from the sightlines of other customers, and Scarlett told her everything. About the phone call, about the blackmailer, about the 6 months in Portland she had never mentioned to anyone. Megan listened in silence, her eyes widening more and more as the story unfolded. When Scarlett finished, the younger woman reached across the table, took Scarlett's hand, and squeezed. You have to tell Roman, Megan said, her voice firm. He has power. He has money. He has people who can handle this. You cannot face blackmailers on your own. If free. Scarlett shook her head, tears spilling over again. You do not understand. If he sees those pictures, if he finds out about Portland, what will he think? I have kept this from him for 3 years, and those photos, they look so bad, Megan. He might think the boys are not his, but they are his, Megan shot back. You know that, and if he truly loves you the way he says he does, he will believe you. I cannot, Scarlett whispered. I am too ashamed. What I did in Portland, those compromises. I cannot look him in the eye and admit them. Megan was about to say something more, but she stopped when her gaze caught on something over Scarlett's shoulder. The young woman's face drained of color. "Scarlett," Megan breathed. "Two men are staring at us. They just walked in and they are coming this way." Scarlett turned, and her heart seemed to stop. Two men in black suits, their faces hard and expressionless, were walking straight toward their table. One of them was tall and lean, with a long scar running down his left cheek. The other was shorter, but built wide across the shoulders like an athlete, his narrow eyes fixed on Scarlett with open contempt. "Scarlett Blackwood." The scarred man spoke when they reached them, and his voice was the same voice from the phone. "Did you not listen to our advice? We said 3 days. Not 3 days for you to sit here and pour your heart out to your friends." Scarlett stood, her legs trembling. "You have been following me? We are following our investment." The shorter man gave a sharp, ugly smile. "And you, Mrs. Blackwood, are a very promising investment." Megan rose too, her body rigid, as if ready to fight. "Who are you? This is a public place. You cannot threaten people like this." Annette, the scarred man flicked his gaze to Megan as if she were nothing more than an annoying fly. "Girl, this is not your business. Sit down and shut your mouth if you do not want trouble." They shifted their positions. One man moved to block the path to the front door. The other angled himself to cut off the aisle toward the back. Scarlett realized, with a surge of horror, that they were boxed in. Other customers glanced over with curiosity, but no one intervened. This was Seattle, where people were taught not to involve themselves in someone else's trouble. $60,000, the scarred man said, his voice lowered, thick with menace. "You have 3 days. If not, the photos will be sent, and that small, pretty life you are building will vanish like smoke. Your husband will learn the truth about the whore he married." The word landed like a slap across Scarlett's face. She felt as if she were suffocating, as if the air inside the coffee shop had turned heavy and thick around her. And in that moment of desperation, she did what she had believed she would never do. She pulled out her phone and called Roman. "I am at Cafe Umbria near Pike Place Market," she said, her voice shaking, but clear. "Two men are threatening me. I need you." Roman arrived in 7 minutes. The coffee shop door flew open, and he walked in, followed by 4 security guards in black suits. He did not shout. He did not create a scene. He simply stood there, gray eyes sweeping the room until they settled on the 2 blackmailers, and Scarlett saw it. The coldness in his gaze. The lethal danger she had witnessed in the warehouse that night. But this time, it was not aimed at her. It was aimed at the men who dared to threaten his wife. "You," Roman's voice carried, deep and icy, "have made a very, very serious mistake." Roman did not shout. He did not punch. He did not do anything Scarlett had witnessed in that warehouse that night. He only took out his phone and made a single call. His voice was calm in a way that was terrifying as he gave orders in Italian, words Scarlett did not understand, but the 2 blackmailers understood perfectly. Their faces went pale. Their arrogance dissolved and was replaced by pure fear. Less than 5 minutes later, a black van pulled up outside the cafe, and Roman's security team escorted the 2 men out without any resistance at all. They knew who they were facing, and they knew resistance would only make everything worse. When they were gone, Roman turned to Megan and spoke more gently. "Thank you for staying with her. I will make sure you get home safely." Then he placed a hand on Scarlett's back, the touch gentle, but impossible to refuse. "We need to talk. At home. Ever." Scarlett nodded, too drained to argue. She hugged Megan, whispered her thanks, and then followed Roman to the car. During the drive back to his penthouse, they did not say a word. Scarlett stared out the window, her heart racing as she thought about the conversation ahead. She knew she could not hide anymore. Roman had heard what the blackmailers said. He knew there was a secret, and he would not stop until he knew everything. When they entered Roman's penthouse, he led her to the living room and sat beside her on the sofa. His gray eyes settled on her, not judging, not angry, only waiting. "Tell me," he said, "everything about Portland." And Scarlett told him. She told him about the 6 months of hell after she left Chicago, about how the money ran out faster than she had imagined, about how no one would hire a pregnant woman with no experience, no papers, no fixed address, about the night she had faced a choice between sleeping on the street and cutting cold, or accepting the proposition of an older landlord. She told him about the months in a damp basement apartment, about enduring leering looks and accidental hands in exchange for having her rent reduced. She did not sleep with him, she emphasized that. But there were moments when she had to let him hold her, let him touch her shoulder, her back, her hair, moments that made her want to vomit, but she endured them for the child inside her. Tears streamed down her face as she spoke. Shame crushed her like a massive stone on her chest. She could not look Roman in the eye, afraid she would see disgust, contempt, suspicion, everything she was sure would be there. But instead of the judgment she was bracing for, Roman did the one thing she never expected. He held her. He pulled her into his arms, holding her tight as if she were the most precious thing in the world, and let her cry against his chest. "You did what you had to do to survive and protect our children." His voice was deep and gentle in her ear. "You were alone, pregnant, with no money, with no one to help you. You fought to keep the boys safe in every way you could. I have no right to judge you, Scarlett. I only wish I had found you sooner, so you would not have had to endure those things." "Thanks for watching," Scarlett cried. She cried the way she had not been able to cry in the last 3 years. All the pain, the shame, the loneliness she had held back for so long now pouring out like a broken dam. And Roman only held her, one hand stroking her hair, his mouth whispering comfort in Italian she did not understand, though the sound of it still soothed her. That night, for the first time since she returned, Scarlett did not go back to her separate room. She stayed in Roman's room, lying in his arms on the wide bed. They did nothing. He only held her, and she only cried until there were no tears left, and then drifted to sleep in the arms of the man she had once believed was a monster. They returned to the penthouse in silence, but it was not the tight, strained silence of the early days. It was the silence of two people standing at the threshold of something important, both of them knowing it, and neither daring to speak it first. Roman opened the door and let Scarlett step in ahead of him, as he always did. A small, gallant gesture she once would have dismissed, but now it warmed her chest. He took off his coat and hung it on the hook, then turned to her with a questioning look, as if waiting for her to decide what came next. Scarlett stood in the middle of the living room, city lights pouring through the wide windows and falling across her green dress, casting soft shadows over her pale skin. She thought of everything that had happened. The night she saw Roman in the warehouse and ran. The 3 years she lived in fear and loneliness. Marcus Delgado laughing and talking at tonight's dinner party, healthy and whole. The man standing in front of her now. The man who had waited for 3 years, who had changed an entire empire, who had been patient and gentle even when she pushed him away. She had run from a future she had imagined in her own mind. She had let fear steer her life for 3 years. But tonight, standing in this penthouse, looking into the gray eyes waiting on her with all the patience in the world, she knew she did not want to run anymore. "Roman," she said his name, her voice as soft as breath. He stepped closer, but still kept his distance, still respected the boundary she had set from the beginning. "Do you want me to have a car? Take you back to your apartment?" Scarlett shook her head. She walked toward him, one step at a time, until only a hand's breadth separated them. She lifted her face, green eyes meeting gray, and she spoke the words she had held back for so long. "I choose you, tonight and every night after." She saw the moment the words reached him. His gray eyes widened, his breath caught, and in a single instant, the mask of control he always wore fell away completely. She saw hope. She saw hunger. She saw a love so fierce it nearly hurt. "Scarlett," he whispered her name like a prayer. "Are you sure? I do not want you to do anything you will regret. I have regretted everything for 3 years. She lifted her hand and placed her palm over his chest, feeling the hard, rapid beat of his heart beneath the fabric of his shirt. "I regret running without giving you a chance to explain. I regret taking 3 years of fatherhood from you and the boys. I regret letting fear destroy the best thing that ever happened to me." She looked straight into his eyes. "I do not want to regret anymore." Roman did not need to hear more. He bent down and kissed her. The first kiss in more than 3 years. It began gently, as if he feared she would change her mind and vanish. But when Scarlett slid her arms around his neck and pulled him closer, the kiss deepened, turned hungry, as if they were trying to make up for all the time they had lost. They moved toward the bedroom without breaking the seal of their mouths. Roman unzipped her green dress and let it fall to the floor like a pool of silk. Scarlett undid the buttons of his shirt with trembling fingers, and when they finally lay down together on the bed, skin against skin, breath mingling, Scarlett felt as if she were coming home after a long, endless journey. Roman loved her slowly, gently, as if they had a lifetime ahead of them. He worshipped her with every touch, every kiss, every whispered Italian word she did not understand, yet made her heart melt. This was not possession, not demand. This was a reaffirmation of their vows from years ago. Two people finding their way back to each other after so much suffering and misunderstanding. When dawn rose through the windows, Scarlett woke in Roman's arms. Her head rested on his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heart beneath her ear. He was still asleep, his face peaceful and softer than she had ever seen it, one arm still wrapped tightly around her, as if afraid she would disappear. She did not want a separate room anymore. She did not want distance anymore. She wanted to wake up like this every morning, in his arms, surrounded by his warmth. They were no longer husband and wife because of a deal. They were husband and wife because of love. And this time, Scarlett would not run. 3 months of happiness passed like a dream Scarlett once believed she did not deserve to have. She moved fully into Roman's penthouse. The old apartment was kept for occasions when it might be needed, but it was no longer the place she called home. Every morning she woke in his arms. Every night they read stories to Ethan and Noah before bed. Every weekend they took the boys to the park or a museum like an ordinary family. Her work at Bright Futures Foundation kept growing, with 3 new learning centers opened in the last 2 months. Scarlett's life finally had meaning, purpose, and love. She began to believe the dark past had truly stayed behind them. Then she realized something was wrong. Roman began to grow more tense. Secret phone calls in the middle of the night. Meetings that dragged on for hours, with no explanations. The worried looks he tried to hide whenever he looked at the boys. The security around them doubled, then tripled. Someone tailed them whenever they left the building. A car sat outside Ethan and Noah's school all day. When Scarlett asked, Roman only said it was a normal precaution. But she had lived with him long enough to know when he was lying. Finally, one night after the boys were asleep, she forced him to tell her the truth. They sat in Roman's study, the door shut, Seattle's city lights glittering beyond the windows. Roman sat in his chair, his face tired, as if he had aged a few years compared to the man she had fallen in love with again 3 months earlier. He was silent for a long time after she asked, as though weighing how much truth he could give her. Marco Moretti, he finally said, his voice deep and heavy. The younger brother of Vincent Moretti, head of the Moretti family in Chicago. When I left the underworld, I took a great deal of information with me, enough to destroy many families, including the Morettis. I used it as an insurance card, to make sure that if anything happened to me, or to the people I love, everything would be sent to the FBI. Scarlett felt her blood go cold. And Marco? Marco is not satisfied with that arrangement. Roman held her gaze, his gray eyes full of emotions she could not fully read. He thinks he can force me to hand over the information by threatening what I value most. He paused, drawing a deep breath. He is planning to kidnap one of the children. Scarlett's world fell apart. She felt as if someone had pulled all the air out of her lungs. Ethan, Noah, her tiny boys, the lives she had sacrificed everything to protect. Someone was planning to take them. No, she whispered, her voice shaking. No, you cannot let that happen. I will not let that happen. Roman took her hand and squeezed hard. But I need you to know the truth, and I need you to trust me. Scarlett looked into her husband's eyes. The man she once ran from, the man she once believed was a monster, but also the man who had changed everything for her, who had waited for her with patience, who had loved her and their children with everything he had. Protect them, she said, her voice stronger than she expected. Do whatever has to be done, Roman. I trust you. Actually, Roman studied her for a long moment, then nodded. He bent to kiss her forehead, a kiss full of promise. Then he vanished. The next 48 hours were hell. Scarlett stayed home with the boys, protected by a security presence so thick she felt as if she were living inside a fortress. Roman did not call. He did not text. There was no contact at all. She did not sleep. She did not eat. She only watched over Ethan and Noah as they slept and prayed her husband would come back safely. When Roman finally stepped through the door on the afternoon of the 3rd day, Scarlett ran into his arms and cried. He looked exhausted, stubble rough across his jaw, his clothes wrinkled, but he was whole. No blood, no wounds, nothing to suggest he had done anything violent. Marco Moretti was arrested by the FBI this morning, Roman said, his voice hoarse with fatigue. Smuggling, money laundering, conspiracy to kidnap, and about 10 other charges. I handed all the evidence to the authorities. He and the entire Moretti family will go to prison for the rest of their lives. Scarlett lifted her face to look at him, tears still sliding down her cheeks. You did not kill him? Roman shook his head, gray eyes gentle on hers. I promised you. No violence. I used the law as a weapon instead of my fists. Marco will pay for what he planned to do, but not in blood. She held him tighter, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath his shirt. He had kept his promise. He had protected their family without becoming the monster she once feared. And in that moment, Scarlett knew she had been right to choose to trust him. 6 weeks after the threat from the Moretti family was put down, Scarlett stood before a mirror in a small room at a beautiful vineyard just outside Seattle. She wore white, not the lavish wedding gown from the first time, but a simple lace dress that fell to her ankles, a bouquet of lavender in her hands. This time there were no hundreds of unfamiliar guests, no press, no curious eyes, only family and the closest friends, the people who truly mattered. Megan stood beside her as maid of honor, tears shining in her eyes as she looked at her friend. Catherine Chen sat in the front row, and for the first time Scarlett saw the stern woman offer a real smile. And at the end of the aisle, strewn with flower petals, Roman was waiting for her, and beside him were two little angels in tiny suits. Ethan and Noah were the ring bearers, each one holding a small pillow with the wedding rings resting on top. They looked so serious it was almost funny, trying to stand up straight and not move the way Roman had instructed. But when Scarlett started down the aisle, both of them forgot their duty and ran straight to hug their mother's legs. "Mom, you are so pretty," Ethan shouted. "Mom, you look like a princess," Noah added. Scarlett laughed through tears and bent to kiss the crown of each boy's head. Then she lifted her gaze and saw Roman watching her, his gray eyes shimmering in the afternoon sunlight, and she knew this was where she belonged. The vows this time were different from the first. There were no hollow promises, no pre-written commitments, only truth, raw and sincere. "I ran from you because I was afraid," Scarlett said, her voice trembling but clear. "Today I stay because of love. I choose you, Roman Blackwood, with everything you have been and everything you will become. I promise I will never run again, because anywhere without you is not home." Roman took her hand, his eyes wet as he answered, "You are my salvation, Scarlett. I lived in the dark for so many years, believing it was the only way to survive. But you showed me there is another way, a better life. I promise I will spend the rest of my life worthy of your choice, to become the father our children deserve, and to love you with everything I am." 1 year later, Scarlett gave birth to a daughter. Aurora Rose Blackwood entered the world on a spring night, when cherry blossoms were blooming all over Seattle. The baby had black hair like her father, and green eyes like her mother, a perfect blend of both. When the doctor placed the child into Roman's arms for the first time, the man who had once been the most feared Mafia boss in Chicago cried, not the tight, hidden kind of crying he tried to bury, but tears that ran freely down his cheeks, unashamed, uncovered. "She is perfect," he whispered, his large finger gently stroking his daughter's cheek. "You are perfect, Aurora." Ethan and Noah were brought into the room to meet their sister. The two boys, 3.5 years old, stared at the tiny life in their father's arms with wide, astonished eyes. "She is so small," Ethan whispered. "We will protect her," Noah declared, his voice serious as if he were making a sacred vow. "Forever." Roman looked at his sons, then at Scarlett lying in the hospital bed, exhausted but smiling with happiness. He carried Aurora to the bed, sat beside his wife, and pulled his two boys into his other arm. The family of 5 held one another in that perfect moment. "This is home," Roman said, his voice deep and full of feeling. "You are my home, not the penthouse, not the corporation, not anything else. Only you, Ethan, Noah, Aurora, and you, Scarlett. You are all I need." Scarlett rested her head against her husband's shoulder, looking at her children, and at last she understood. Home is not a place. Home is not 4 walls or a specific address. Home is the people who love you enough to change for you, the people willing to fight for you, the people who see every dark corner of you and still choose to stay. She ran once out of fear. She would never run again, because at last, after all the suffering and misunderstanding, she had found home. Scarlett and Roman's story is proof that people can change if they have enough motivation and love. It reminds us that sometimes, what we fear most is not as frightening as we imagine, and giving someone a second chance can lead to happiness we never expected. Most importantly, this story shows that family is not defined by the circumstances of birth, but by the love and sacrifice we are willing to give each other. If this story touched your heart, please hit the like button and share to support our channel. And if you have not subscribed yet, subscribe now so you do not miss more moving stories every day. We would love to know how you feel about this story. Have you ever met someone who changed because of love? Do you believe people can truly change? Share your thoughts in the comments. We always want to hear your most honest feelings from the depths of your heart. Thank you for watching all the way to the end of the video. We wish everyone the very best, health, a joyful life, peace, and happiness every day. Goodbye, and we will see you in the next video.